Hello again, it's Russ, and wanted to continue our series of financial planning in public. If you watched our last installment, you will recall that we wound up on the investment risk screen, which you can see in front of you now. This is important and illustrative of the fact that we don't want to be locked into any assumptions or variables in the plan. That's why, again, instead of thinking of investment risk or risk tolerance as a single point, we actually want to think of it in terms of ranges of what we would like to have happen versus what we might be willing to deal with to make the plan work. And you'll probably see this. You'll see this concept arise throughout the rest of the plan building process, as well as when we start getting into actual looking at different planning scenarios. So let's move along to savings. So right now, Lillian is employed, and she is currently putting money into a 401k at work. She's putting money into the pre-tax 401k. And we look here at the range of her putting as little as 6% in, up to putting 10% in. Again, this is another example of ideal and acceptable. Ideally, she would love to save less so she could have more discretionary income to enjoy today. But if she needed to, she'd be willing to save a little bit more. In addition to her contributions, we have the 401k match. That's going to be the same regardless of her contribution because her company contributes 50 cents on the dollar up to the first 6%. So at the ideal level here, if Lillian were to contribute 6%, she would be getting a 3% company match. And that is going to be the same even in the event that she were to increase her savings contributions. We also discussed for Lillian an IRA contribution every year. Again, ideally, she would like to not have to do this, so that would be zero. But if she needed to, she might be willing to put up to $7,000 a year, which is the current maximum, including the catch-up provision for those over the age of 50. And then we also looked at some non-IRA or non-retirement savings. So this would just go into a regular brokerage account. Once again, ideally, the amount is zero, but if she needs to make her plan work, or in order to achieve other goals that are perhaps more important to her, she might be willing to save up to $7,500 a year. So these are the current savings assumptions that we're going to build into the initial draft of the plan. As we go through them and actually look at different planning scenarios, you'll get a better sense of how we can adjust and account for different scenarios and different savings levels. Over here on the left, I'm going to skip annuities. That does not apply. Goal prioritization applies, but I'm going to actually come back to that in a later video. So here we're looking at other income. So this is going to be any income that's going to be coming into Lillian's financial life now or in the future. So we've got Social Security. Ideally, Lillian would take Social Security as early as possible, age 62, and she would get a little over $23,000 a year. But if necessary, she might be willing to defer up to age 70, which is the latest that she can delay taking Social Security. She would get a much larger amount, but again, there would be another 8 years or so before she would start that. Or if Lillian were to take Social Security at her full retirement age, which based on her date of birth is age 67, she'd get a little over $34,000 a year. In addition to Social Security, Lillian is anticipating an inheritance from her mother. Lillian told me in our hypothetical discussion that she thinks she'll get $600,000 to $750,000 from her mom, but her mom is still alive and doing pretty well for her age. And so based on our discussion, we just decided to discount the number a little bit. So rather than assuming $600,000 or $750,000, we're actually building in an assumption of $400,000. And we're estimating that this could happen 12 years from now. So at the time Lillian turns 73. Taxes are important in the plan and the analysis. As I mentioned at the outset, Lillian is a Georgia resident. We assume she's going to stay in Georgia throughout retirement, so no post-retirement move there. And we're using a dynamic tax method. You don't need to get too into the weeds, or I don't need to get too in the weeds on this right now. Just know that dynamic basically recalculates taxes every year of the analysis, and we can look more at in more detail at that in the future. We're also assuming that most of her gains are long-term and that we're going to have a very low portfolio turnover, meaning we're not going to be trading the portfolio, which should also help reduce taxes. If we look at a quick net worth statement. So again, as we covered earlier, Lillian has a brokerage account at Charles Schwab that's worth about $688,000 with a cost basis or a tax basis of about $250,000. She's got the 401k plan at work. That's worth a little over $166,000. She's got the IRA account also at Schwab, which is just under $800,000. So her total non-retirement assets are $688,000. Her total retirement assets are just over $950,000. So if you add those two numbers up, her total investment assets are $1.645 million. Down here, we've got some non-investment assets. As a reminder, these assets are not going to be included in any of the analysis that we'll be looking at in the future. These are really just placeholders to give us a better sense of Lillian's net worth and her balance sheet, her assets and liabilities. So she has the 2015 Lexus that is paid for. It's worth $30,000. She's got a checking account at Bank of America with $6,000 in it. She's got a Bank of America savings account with about $21,000 in it. And then her home is worth about $650,000. And she has a mortgage on her home for about $200,000. So if we add all this up and we deduct the $200,000 mortgage balance, Lillian has a net worth of about $2.15 million. So let's jump into a very, very brief introduction of what Lillian's plan looks like. So here on the screen are actually three financial plans, all for Lillian. Over on the left is her ideal. So again, this is her ideal set of goals and assumptions. Generally speaking, this is more aspirational, more what would we do if we could? So generally speaking, this is retiring sooner, spending more, saving less, leaving more money behind, achieving other goals that she might otherwise be willing to forego if she needed to. Over here on the far right is the acceptable plan. Acceptable meaning these are things that Lillian might be willing to do if she needed to, meaning if her life circumstances called for it, or if market and economic circumstances called for it. So we're kind of using ideal and acceptable as bookends. And then my role is, as Lillian's financial advisor, is to come up with a recommended plan that gets her as close to her ideal as possible, meaning we want to strive and reach towards her aspirational stretch goals, but we want to do it in such a way that we believe is going to be sustainable into the future, into an uncertain future, and that we'll have enough comfort and confidence that we'll be able to maintain Lillian's plan and only have to make some small adjustments along the way. So there's a lot of information on this page. You can see these different percentages at the top, these different colors. There's a lot to unpack here, and I'm going to save that until our next installment. So thanks again for joining us, and I will be back to you soon.